Welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm Megan, and this channel is all about the Immanuel Approach, and it is my utter delight to share with you an interview that I had with Dr. Karl Lehman, the man, the myth, the legend behind the Immanuel Approach. This man is such a delight, and I enjoyed our conversation so much. We could have talked for hours. This gentleman spent hours and hours and hours of his life developing the Emmanuel lifestyle and the Emmanuel approach, born out of a longing of his to experience God, not just know about God in his left brain. I really hope that you enjoy this interview. I sure did. And here we go. Well, good morning, Dr. Karl. I am so delighted to be with you. It was fun to have a little chat with you before I hit record. And I thank you so much for your time. And so I would love for you to tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got interested in Emmanuel Approach.
Yes, so I'll try to make this brief so we can have more time to talk about the living presence of Jesus. But so,
Yes.
board certified psychiatrist, a lot of science background. I have a bachelor's degree in physics and a bachelor's degree in chemistry and a bachelor's degree in biology. So I tend to think like a scientist.
Yes.
I did 40 years of Christian life, 38, 40 years of Christian life without any experience of the felt presence of God. Just left hemisphere, read the Bible, try to do what's right,
Yep.
cognitively believe in the good news. But that was hard. That was not very life-giving. I honestly don't know how I did it. That's one of the quiet miracles of the Holy Spirit. So one part of how I got to the Emmanuel approach is just for about 25 years of that 40, I was aware of. I knew people who had tangible experiences of God's felt presence, who had dramatic, emotional, subjective experiences of God's intervention in some way, whether it was charismatic renewal or just experiencing Jesus's presence or healing experiences. And I tried all the other things. I went to so many different conferences and tried so many different exercises and prayers, and nothing worked for me. I would watch hundreds of people around me reporting wonderful, joyous experiences, and nothing. I never experienced even the slightest hint of God's felt presence. So that was a longing for me for decades.
Yeah.
And then another piece of the puzzle was being a psychiatrist, seeing clients. And actually, I went into this already knowing. My father was an LCSW. He actually integrated prayer with his therapy and counseling work. I read Francis McNutt and
Mhm.
Agnes Sanford. I knew about the idea of healing for trauma, having the living presence of Jesus or God, Father God, Holy Spirit, be having a person encounter the living presence of God inside of a traumatic memory to get healing, and that would result in all kinds of benefits. That trauma can affect depression and panic and phobias. That practically every mental illness in the world is either caused by or at the very least exacerbated by trauma. So the idea of healing for trauma with the living presence of God, I was familiar with that. As a psychiatrist, I included that in my work at varying levels. At first, just okay, we're going to do therapy and pray for healing, and then with EMDR, if people are familiar with that, there are techniques. God's gifts to the unbelievers. There are secular therapy techniques that understand the brain science enough to be able to accomplish memory reconsolidation, permanent trauma healing. There are techniques that work, secular techniques that don't explicitly include the living presence of Jesus. And I would use those along together with prayer. I would ask for God's presence. I would invite Jesus to combine with the MDR. I learned Theophostic. And in all that, I saw occasional dramatic healing, but there was still quite a few of my patients that were stuck. That I knew
Mhm.
it worked. I saw it work. I said, a significant percentage of dramatic healing, life-changing healing in my office, but there were quite a few people who were still stuck.
Mhm.
And I just remember one day I worked with this one person for months and months and months and tried every troubleshooting tool I had ever heard of or knew, and still just stuck. And I just remember just praying, Jesus, I know you're here. I know you can do this. I know you want to do this.
Mhm.
We just can't figure out what's in the way. Can you please give us more help?
Yeah.
And just one of the clearest experiences I've ever had in my life of feeling like revelation with a small R from the Lord. Just just clear thoughts came in about kind of shifting the priorities and making helping the person actually connect with Jesus be the center of everything. And it was just the core, the first beginning seeds of the Emmanuel approach just came in immediate response to that request.
Love it.
I know you want to heal this person. I know you can heal this person. I know you're right here with us. We cannot figure out what's in the way. More help, please, Jesus. And the original, the first seeds of the Emmanuel approach just came clearly into my mind. Like I said, one of the most dramatic experiences I've ever had of feeling like I got immediate response from the Lord and some clear, tangible guidance. So that was the beginning of that, and it came out of wanting healing for my people, people in pain, people I cared about, trying every other tool I knew of, and then asking for more help. That was 25 years ago, and so for the last 25 years, just trying to develop it, refine it. Dr. Wilder and I, shortly after that initial kind of interaction with the Lord, I was sharing with Jim about some of the new ideas, and then he and I together, a lot of the pieces of the Emmanuel approach, Jim and I figured out together in
Mhm.
weekly conversations as we were collaborating on some other things at that time.
Mm.
So that's how I came to the Emmanuel approach, and then I spent the last 25 years of my life developing it, sharing it, refining it, helping everybody in the world, as many people as possible,
Possible. Yeah.
to use this tool. And initially, it was for healing trauma, but then we eventually realized, oh, once we help people connect with Jesus, I mean, trauma is good. I mean, that's what's one of the things you can do, but there's
Yeah.
also other things as well. So
Yes.
that's
I love it.
that's the short story.
Yeah. Uh,
However,
what resonates with me with you is that longing. I think I've had a similar longing, even though I haven't had the journey that you've had. And it's so amazing to me that with the Emmanuel approach, that longing has been met. So I'm
oh,
just so grateful.
yes, I tell you, the good news is so much better news with the living presence of Jesus in the middle of it.
Absolutely.
That,
Absolutely.
that has changed the world.
Exactly. Exactly. So tell me your elevator version. I know you have like several on your
Yeah.
website. Your
Yes.
elevator version of what is the Emmanuel approach
So
from the man himself.
I'll, I'll give you the 30-second version.
Okay, great.
When I was recently at this Christian mental health professional think tank in Georgia, I had a sense from the Holy Spirit. A couple weeks before, I was kind of praying, hey, how can I maximize the strategic value of this whole gathering? How can I be a good steward? And one of the thoughts that came to me is to get that elevator speech. Have like a 15-second, 30-second, 45-second version, and get a package there so that I could meet somebody and in the first minute give them the elevator speech of what I do as the Emmanuel approach, as opposed to talk for 20 minutes before bringing it up. And by that time, you've been interrupted and they have to leave. And you have a whole conversation, which is very nice. And you know the person's name and where they live and what their kids' names are and what they do for a living, but you never talked about the Emmanuel approach. So the whether it's 30 or 45 seconds, I'm not sure, but it goes like this. So um, we apply brain science and biblical principles to help the recipient establish an interactive connection with the living, tangible, personal presence of Jesus. And then once they have that connection in place, if we're doing therapy, we coach them to engage with Jesus as the primary therapist. If we're doing spiritual direction, we coach them to engage directly with Jesus as the primary spiritual director. If they're struggling with some particular issue, you coach them, okay, can you look at that issue with Jesus? If
Mhm.
they have intercessory concerns, you say, okay, let's help you connect with Jesus, and then just talk to Jesus directly. Hey, my nephew has cancer, or whatever's in your heart, get words for it, and then just talk directly to Jesus about what you want, what you need.
Mhm.
Or if you just want to spend time enjoying the presence of Jesus, that's an option as well. So That's whatever that took, 40 seconds or whatever.
Exactly.
That's the 40-second version.
That's the
And like
first.
the 3-minute version or a 5-minute version is to add, like, if they have a little more time, you say, okay, like, and some of that brain science I can summarize in a couple minutes.
Yes.
One is God created us to be relational beings. I mean, He created us to our minds and spirits. We long for connection with other people and with God.
Mhm.
And with that relational, creating us to be relational beings, kind of makes sense that God created a big chunk of our brains to provide the hardware, the neurological hardware for that relational connection. And so I call those relational circuits.
Yes.
Another, a very relevant, fairly simple piece of brain science is that the way our brains are designed, they're wired so that if you recall a positive memory and then think about and talk about the details until you feel the gratitude from the original experience, that will turn on your relational circuits. Same way that your visual circuits, if you open your eyes, your visual cortex lights up. It's not something you choose to do. It's just the way your brain's wired. If you open your eyes, your visual cortex lights up. If your head's in a scanner that's showing your living functioning brain, you open your eyes, your visual cortex lights up. That's just the way it's wired. Same way, if you recall a positive memory, connect with it, focus on it, talk about the details until you feel gratitude, your relational circuits will light up. And that prepares your brain to be more able to connect with the Lord. So that's like a brain science that we apply. That's why we start the Emmanuel approach with remember a positive memory and tell me about it until you feel grateful. And then another piece of brain science is our brains have been designed to work better in community. And there's a number of ways. There's a whole hour presentation I can do about
Yeah.
there's a number of different ways about there's a number of different ways in which our brains have been designed to work best in community. Very cool, amazing. It makes a wonderful seminar or sermon or whatever.
Yeah.
But the piece that applies to the Emmanuel approach is that if you often we will have mental content, we'll have an image or a thought that comes into our awareness, and we won't recognize it as important. I mean, sometimes you do, which is wonderful, but often there'll be subtle content
Yes.
that you won't recognize what it means and you won't feel that it's important. And if you just add this simple little thing of you have the facilitator coach, it takes a little bit of practice to learn, but it's something that the average layperson can learn to do this. You coach the person to notice subtle things in their awareness that they have not really even recognized as being important and describe them out loud, get words for them. So whatever's coming into your awareness right now, even if it doesn't feel important or make sense,
Right.
I want you to get words for it and to describe it to me out loud. And just that process of deliberately kind of looking around for things that they're there, but you haven't even noticed them yet, really, and then getting words to describe them, and then describing that out loud to another person, that pulls the content to the parts of your brain that help you recognize what it means and feel that it's important. And the way that looks is, like I said, sometimes, you have some kind of internal experience and you recognize right away, oh, I'm remembering, my wedding with Charlotte or whatever. But frequently, when people do an exercise like something similar to the Emmanuel approach, close your eyes, invite the Lord's presence. Lord, can you help me perceive your presence? All the exercises, all the seminars I went to for years and years and years before the Emmanuel approach that never worked for me. Looking at that carefully with myself and observing others as well. In the big Lion book, there's an entire chapter about this that gives all the details. But what I have become convinced of is that many people who try various exercises similar to the Emmanuel approach with the goal of experiencing God's felt presence in some way, it's actually working, but they erroneously conclude that it's not working because the Lord's presence is subtle.
Yes.
The manifestations of the Lord's presence is subtle, and content coming to them from the Lord is subtle. And it's what they're asking for is actually there, and they just walk right past it.
Yeah.
And part of how I know that is because I've done the Emmanuel approach with hundreds of people who initially say it's not working. I say, okay, just humor me. Just notice anything that's coming, anything at all that you're noticing in your internal awareness, and get words for it and describe it out loud. Just humor me. I said, well, it's not working. Well, yeah, I know. It's not, I know it's working. Just humor me.
Yeah.
Well, I do actually have an image of Jesus's face, but I think maybe I'm just making that. Well, just go ahead and explain it. Just go ahead and describe it to me. Just humor me. And in 30 seconds, I have an image of the Lord's face, but I'm afraid maybe I'm just making it up. Okay, so we just name that. Okay, Lord, caveat. We have registered that caveat. So with that caveat in place, doesn't have to make any more noise. Tell me, so what's happening? What's Jesus's face doing? Well, he's kind of just sort of smiling, and all of a sudden they're like the emotions connect, and they realize, oh my gosh! And his face is actually moving in response to what I'm saying, and I can feel it's alive. And there's a living, interactive presence there, and many people who will try similar techniques and conclude that they don't work. If they add this piece
Yeah.
really rigorously,
Yeah.
it will tip the balance from it's not working and over to, oh my goodness, I think I am perceiving the Lord's living presence.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
that's another piece of brain science we very deliberately put into the Emmanuel approach
Yes.
and makes a big difference. And then a third big piece is troubleshooting. There's a whole, if
Yeah.
I'm utterly convinced that Jesus, the Lord is always with us.
Yes.
And if you cannot perceive his presence, is because there's something in the way.
Yeah.
And if you can find and remove that blockage, then you do perceive the Lord's presence. So that's one, there's a really rigorous troubleshooting piece
Yeah.
founded on that incredibly, I'm utterly convinced of that faith piece.
Yeah.
That when you
Yeah.
try something and you can't perceive Jesus, it's not because, well, he just doesn't want to be with me today, or he doesn't live in Illinois, or he's busy somewhere in Africa right now. The truth is, he's always standing beside you.
Yeah.
He always wants to be with you. He always wants you to be able to perceive his presence. If
Yeah.
that's not working and there's something in the way, when you move it, it will work. And if you go in with strong faith there, close to 100%,
Yeah.
if you persist with troubleshooting, it'll eventually work.
It's amazing. Yeah.
It's amazing. It's
Yeah.
amazing. And then the safety net piece where you start with a positive memory connection with Jesus. And then when you go, if you do trauma work, if so you're late, let's say we're in Uganda. I sent a team over there. They're working with 25-year-old volunteers with third grade educations, and they have a day to train them and a day to do ministry. Um, So this is, yeah, that's kind of minimal, and they're going to be doing huge trauma work. I mean, this is an area where every single person in these villages has seen one or more members of their family, brutalized, murdered,
Yeah.
dismembered in their front yard. So we're sending out 20-something-year-old volunteers with third grade educations with one day of training to do trauma work that the average PhD psychologist would be like, oh, what do we do? And a crazy piece that this is one when Jim and I stumbled on it, we were like, oh my goodness, this is big. If they start with a positive memory connection with Jesus, and then two pieces there. One is if they don't have that, then they do not go to do trauma work.
Absolutely.
The people who, and what we found is most of the people who have trouble are the ones who aren't able to do that in the beginning. So we identify and protect the folks that are most likely to get in trouble.
Yes.
Then the second piece is if that 25-year-old volunteer with the third grade education goes in there to the horrific trauma, and in any way, anything happens that he doesn't know what to do with, he gets stuck in any way, he just takes the person back to the positive memory with Jesus, and at least they finish with the plane back on the ground and the person's okay. So that's like the 12-minute version of, if somebody wants, the 30-second version I started with, and
Yes.
if we get out of the elevator and they say, tell me more, we
Yeah.
sit down on the couch, in the lounge area, and that's the 12-minute version that gives them, enough of the key pieces that they get the feeling of, oh, this makes sense. And these are some new pieces,
Mhm.
and they actually make sense. The goal there is they it makes enough sense, and it also feels new enough that they realize, I think I want to look into this more. So
Yeah.
there you go.
Oh, thank you so much. I think that's one of the things I love about this method and this approach is how gentle it actually is. And even going into pain, and I know this isn't everybody's, experience, um, but for me, it's not, I can't describe it, but I don't know. It just doesn't hurt as much as I thought it would because the presence of Jesus is there. You know what I mean? It's so
I
interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
and this is one where, like I said, there are other techniques like EMDR, and there's a number of other therapies they have discovered the phenomena of memory reconsolidation, which now the brain laboratory scientists have clarified those steps. And also, there are secular techniques that deliberately apply memory reconsolidation brain research about resolving psychological trauma, and they work, but they tend to be hard and painful, and you have to spend time in traumatic memories to get the pieces together and have it connect emotionally. And they work, but it's like it's like getting your teeth drew. It's like getting dental work with only partial anesthesia,
Right.
which people do, but they put it off because it's not very pleasant, and it's hard. That's not optimal.
Yes. Not
And
optimal.
what
Exactly.
everybody describes is, if I get into a traumatic memory, as soon as as soon as I can feel the presence of Jesus with me, even before the specific content is resolved,
Yes.
the distress, the pain, the suffering in the traumatic memory goes way down 50, 75, 80, 90%. I mean, the difficulty of the healing work goes way down as soon as you can feel the presence of Jesus in the memory with you. And everybody describes that. And so one of the things I see with Emmanuel work is, some people, it can be hard initially because they've got complicated defenses that they'll go into the traumatic memory and not initially be able to feel Jesus with them. And we figure that out, and as soon as we take care of that, then they say, "Oh my gosh, I can feel Jesus with me," and it's way less distressing. And what's cool is, as a person, if you kind of settle into the lifestyle of Emmanuel healing,
Yes.
as you do more work, it's easier and quicker. What you see all the time is, as the person continues working, they'll get better at perceiving and connecting with Jesus inside their traumatic memories. And so the process will become gentler and gentler, easier and easier, and quicker. For the folks that it's initially difficult with, as they learn that skill and resolve some of those blockages, they will also describe pretty much like, there's a few moments of distress when I first get into the memory. And then within seconds, I'm able to perceive the Lord's presence with me there.
Mhm.
And then it's like, it's hard work. It's hard to describe how much easier it is when you're holding the Lord's hand, when Jesus is standing beside you or standing in front of you. That analogy I use about a little kid, you say, "Oh, can you go into the basement? The light bulb's broken. I'm sorry, it's completely dark. Can you go into the basement, and behind the furnace, there's a wrench I need. Can you go down there and find it for me?" The little kid's like, even if they're tend to be obedient kid, going down in the basement with no light behind the furnace all by themselves, like, exact same scenario. You say, "Oh, I'll go with you and hold your hand." I'm like, "Oh, okay." I mean, it's
Yeah.
that one piece. Dad will hold your hand and go with you. It just changes the world instantaneously. And that's what I've literally lost count. I mean, hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands of people have described that experience to me. That trauma work, that when they used EMDR or other techniques, it worked, but it was painful and slow, and it was hard. It
It
was
takes
hard to do. It took lots of grit and courage, and it just hurt, and it was painful and exhausting. And as I learned to do the Emmanuel approach, especially with this piece, and they were more and more able to quickly perceive Jesus inside the trauma as they did this. Every single person, it's just a completely different battle when the first thing you do in the traumatic memory is perceive and connect with the living, tangible presence of Jesus. That is such crazy good news.
it is. It's incredible. It's incredible. One thing you didn't mention, but one thing I also really appreciate about the Emmanuel approach is the emphasis on testing or tracking, or I don't know the language that you use, but
Testing the fruit, what?
testing the fruit, testing the healing.
Yeah.
Can you speak to that a little bit for me?
Yes, and another one of the anybody who has heard me talk about the Emmanuel approach knows that everything I comment on, I'll try to make it short, in a podcast.
Yes,
But
yes,
but the long answer, there's three whole chapters in the Big Lion book
yes,
about how can you all the things you can test to discern between, is this the real genuine presence of Jesus, or is there some counterfeit? Is this some spiritual presence pretending to be Jesus? Is this the person's own mind, kind of just their own imagination? Is there some dissociated part that's trying to kind of imitate Jesus for some reason? So there's I think it's like 157 pages. So the long version
yes,
is literally like 157 pages in three chapters about all the very rigorous, careful, dependable ways you can use that tools that criteria you can use to discern, is this really Jesus? And the most important gold standard, number one, well, actually consistent with the Bible,
yes,
that's right there in the front.
yes.
And then right next to it is there observable positive change that remains and accumulates over time?
Yeah, yeah,
If the person is doing healing work and they're encountering the real presence of Jesus, as they resolve trauma, 100% of the time, if they've got the real Jesus and they're doing healing work, they are gonna observe positive changes that everybody can see. They're observable, objective, positive changes that remain and accumulate over time. So the ideal is, if you're doing regular healing work, if you're doing regular Emmanuel Approach work, one session can be a little bit more confusing because you get triggered to some other trauma that's not resolved yet, and you feel bad again. It's not like you'll never feel bad again in your life. But
right.
if you do regular Emmanuel Approach work, you and everybody around you, your spouse, your children, your friends, everybody who knows you, and especially you and the closest people, like the people who live in your house,
Yes.
will all agree there are observable, objective, positive changes. You
Mhm.
know, Megan used to have that panic response when in certain, she used to have a phobia of mice. She'd have a panic attack if she had to have surgery. She whatever.
Yeah.
Everybody will agree, oh my goodness, that doesn't happen anymore.
Mhm.
And after she claims she went to some memory with Jesus where she had this car accident where that's when she learned to be afraid of driving at night in the rain. And she claims she went to that memory and experienced the presence of Jesus with her in that memory. And she reports that, only her knows for sure. But the rest of us can all agree that she no longer has that panic attack when
Mhm.
she drives at night in the rain. She
Yeah.
she now is able to drive at night in the rain, and what she claims is now she just senses the presence of Jesus instead of the feeling like she's going to die.
Yeah.
And the rest of us can observe
Yeah.
that we can go with her in the car, and she's driving and she's not anxious, and so that's everybody can see it. And if you learn to watch for observable, objective, positive change that remains and accumulates over time, that's 100% gold standard. If you got that, you can know that you have the real Jesus at least some of the time. And is that the package you were at?
Yes, definitely. I really, really appreciate that because it has helped me in my healing journey because I'm still in my healing journey. Oh, for the rest of my life, right?
Absolutely, it's lifestyle.
Yeah, it's a lifestyle. And that's what I love about this lifestyle. And but that's what there's been a couple recent sessions that I've had that I actually feel different. I'm like, there is a shift. And I'm so excited about it. I can't stop telling people about it because
Yes.
you don't understand. You don't understand what Jesus set me free from and what he met me in. And like you said, I love also is the reconsolidation of the memories. Now I go back to those memories and I start laughing because I'm like, he's right there.
Yes, and for 32 years since it happened when I was in high school,
Yeah.
anytime I thought about this memory, I would feel fill in the blank. This horrible
Yeah.
shame. It was just so embarrassing, and I felt or terror or fear or depression or hopeless despair or whatever it was. So I thought about that memory 52,782 times. Since it happened 32 years ago when I was in high school. Every time I thought about that memory, I have these thoughts and feel all these negative emotions, and it would feel kind of it would the emotions from the memory would kind of come forward into the present, and it would feel like almost I was back in the memory. I would feel horrible. I would feel weak. I'd feel helpless. I'd feel stupid. I would fill in the blank. And now I went to that memory and I walked through it with Jesus, and we looked at it and thought about it and walked through it together. And now when I think about that memory, I sense the presence of Jesus, and I can remember those crazy lies. I mean, I can remember the negative thoughts that used to feel true,
Yeah.
but now it's like, no, of course, that's like, now they feel ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what feels true is Jesus is with me in that memory. And any negative associations, symptoms, triggers, thoughts, emotions that used to come with that memory no longer come.
Yeah. It's incredible.
And that's a pretty cool picture,
Yeah.
which part of the coolness there is, and the power is that the average layperson, I mean, we talked about that. It took us 15 minutes to talk about that.
Yeah.
And the average layperson can get that, like, oh, right.
Yep.
And if you try it, you'll experience what we just described. And part of why it's spreading so quickly and powerfully is that it works.
Yeah.
And it does. I mean, it works.
Yes.
And people can tell. And if you have this conversation about testing the fruit, the average layperson can try it and notice changes that they can describe to people who know them. And anytime you actually consolidate up traumatic memory, so it's been resolved, it stays resolved. When that process is permanent, like all those positive changes will continue. They never. I mean, once that has happened, they're permanent. They continue. The average person can see that. And I actually, this is a couple of years ago, I bumped into the director of the, I think it might be the largest teen challenge addiction center in the country, possibly the world. It's like they've got like 800 residents in this program, a huge program. The director of the outpatient program there, bumped into her at the conference. She said, "Oh yeah, all our people use the Emmanuel approach." I mean, she's the director of the outpatient
Yeah.
portion. Says, "Yeah, I some training was in Minneapolis. There's somebody you trained did a seminar in Minneapolis, and me and some other staff went to it, and we tried it. Like basically, all of our people use the Emmanuel approach because it works." And that was the simple summary.
Yep. Exactly.
Yes. Now here's another cool piece about. So you learn to do the Emmanuel approach just in your personal quiet time. You say, okay, I have an issue I want to kind of look at with Jesus. I want to do spiritual direction with Jesus. There's lots of other felt presence of God experiences that people wonder, was that just my imagination? Was that, and those are harder to test. I mean, if you do them regularly for years and years and years, you can see subtle spiritual growth things kind of unfold. But many of the other aspects of felt presence of God experiences do not have such a nice, clear way to test them, which is part of why I tell people, hey, the spiritual direction is wonderful. The personal quiet time is wonderful. The intercession is wonderful. Spending time with Jesus is wonderful. In fact, the relationship with Jesus is actually the most important, yay. But I implore you on a regular basis, I want you to also include healing work, because that is the gold standard for knowing you've got the real Jesus. Is if healing trauma is in that mix, then you're going to see those objective, observable, positive changes that stay and remain and accumulate over time. And everybody around you can agree. And what's cool there is you say, okay, this has been consistent. And the longer you do it, the stronger it is. Okay, so here I am. I've been doing the Emmanuel approach as kind of a lifestyle for 3.5 years now. And on a regular basis, every third time, or on a regular basis, when I have my prayer time with my prayer partner, I'll work on some kind of painful memory. So over the last 3.5 years, there's kind of been a pile that's been growing, and I can see objective, observable, positive changes. And as I've just regularly, once or twice a month, when I get together with my prayer partner, we include the trauma piece, and over time, steadily, increasingly, larger and larger pile, easier and easier to see. I have those objective, observable, positive changes that we can all see. And then, at least in my experiences, it feels like the same Jesus that shows up in those healing memories. That's the same guy who shows up when I just talk to him about an issue. That's the same guy who shows up when I just spend time with him in a positive memory for fun. That's the same guy who shows up when I have my quiet time and just whatever's on my heart, I just talk to him about it. It's the same guy who shows up when I have intercession. And the fact that there's one place you can check it with such a reliable indicator, verification of validity and it's genuine Jesus, and you can feel it in every qualitative way you can think of checking, it feels like the same guy. To me, that's very reassuring, that these experiences I'm having elsewhere,
Yeah.
I have a lot of confidence that they're also legitimate. So
Yes.
I don't know if that makes sense to you, but that's to
Amazing.
me,
Yeah.
that's been a really significant asset.
Yeah. Yeah. It's beautiful. I love it.